Yeah, hi, hello, welcome and good evening to this webinar on psychology and its prospects. Uh, Today's expert speaker is Dr. Ninad Patwardhan. He is an assistant professor of SRM University, Amravati. He has been working here, working as assistant professor for the past 4 years. Welcome and good evening to this webinar on psychology and its prospects. Today's expert speaker is Dr. Ninad Patwardhan. He is an assistant professor of SRM University, Amravati. He has been working here, working as assistant professor for the past 4 years. Yeah. So we would like to start this session on psychology and its prospects because we have seen many people doing psychology uh, masters in the distance mode, and they're not aware of the depth of the subject. And many people are not able to understand whether to take psychology as a profession or not. If we take it as a profession on psychology and its prospects, because we So that's why I thought we would plan a session on psychology and its prospects. And I would like to hand over the session to Dr. Ninad Patwardhan, assistant professor, and he has done his PhD from IIT Bombay, and he has a rich experience of 4 years into teaching and into research in the field of psychology. So Ninad sir, over to you, sir. I'll make you as a host.
Thank you, Suresh, for a very wonderful introduction. So before we begin today's session, I'm going to play a short video. Okay, so with this, we launch the logo and the channel of PSYCOLLEGE. Now, today's talk, as Suresh rightly mentioned, is on the prospects associated with the discipline of psychology. In this talk, I will primarily focus on a few things, namely, what is psychology, why there is need for psychology in India, what are the career options, and what is the scope of psychology, what are the qualities of a good psychology student, and what is the way ahead if you want to pursue a career in psychology. So coming to the first question, what is psychology? Now, there are many understandings related to the discipline of psychology. Some people think psychology is about the mind. Some people say it's about the behavior. But let me give you a very comprehensive definition of psychology. Now, psychology is a scientific discipline, which means whatever ideas we share with the public, with the students, with colleagues, those ideas are grounded in science. But what do we scientifically examine? Two things. Number one, human behavior. Two, cognition. Now, how different are behavior and cognition? Behavior is something that you can see. So, for example, if I shout loudly at someone in the class, you can clearly see that. So, my shouting becomes a behavior. But cognition is something which is covert or something that you cannot see. So, what may be going in my mind? It's difficult, rather, it's impossible for others to see that. So, that is a part of cognition. So, psychology studies both what is overt or what is observable, what is covert, and what is not observable. But what psychology is not? It is not a lot of things. Number one, people often think oh, you are a psychologist, you are a psychology student, so I'm sure you can read my mind. But can psychologists really read someone's mind? The answer is no. We do not read anybody's mind, but we talk to people to understand them better. And we systematically analyze other people's behaviors and personality traits using well established tests and instruments. Psychology is also not common sense. Now, you may have heard people saying opposites attract, but scientific research in psychology suggests that birds of a feather flock together, which means the more similar you are to someone in terms of attitudes, beliefs, value system, the more likely are you to get along with that person. So, psychology is not always equal to common sense. And in fact, many findings in psychology have defied or challenged commonsensical ideas. Psychology is also not psychiatry. Now, in a country like India, where awareness of mental health is anyways abysmally low, people often think, oh, psychology matlab psychiatry. Psychiatry matlab, it's all that they have those doctors, wo dimag ke doctors hai. And now we have some new specializations coming in, like, for example, rehabilitation psychologists, speech therapists, and these new positions are complicating the picture further. So let me give you a simple distinction between psychology and psychiatry. A psychiatrist is the one who is a medical doctor. So he or she has completed an MBBS and then an MD in psychiatry. A psychiatrist can prescribe medications, can administer electroconvulsive therapy, what is popularly called the shock treatment. But psychologists cannot do what a psychiatrist does. So psychologists, they usually talk to the clients to understand the clients better. And psychologists usually pursue a master's degree in psychology, and then they go on to do either an MPhil or a PhD in the discipline of psychology. Okay, so psychologists usually work with problems that are not way too severe. But in cases where problems are way too severe, they have to work in collaboration with a psychiatrist. So a psychiatrist usually deals with more severe mental health problems. Coming to the need for psychology in India. Now, why psychology is the need of the hour? If you go back to the report released by the Indian Council of Medical Research, their report indicates that in 2017, nearly 197 million people in India, they experienced or suffered from some kind of mental health problem. And 46 million individuals were diagnosed with some depressive disorder, and 45 million individuals were diagnosed with some anxiety disorder. And I'm sure after the COVID-19 pandemic began, the numbers would have gone up even more. But to deal with the increasing mental health burden, we do not have enough trained mental health professionals in India. So the supply of trained mental health professionals is far less compared to the demand for them in the contemporary scenario. Again, another problem is that because we do not have a proper regulatory body in India, like for example in US they have American Psychological Association, which regulates the practice of psychology in terms of what can be done, what cannot be done, who can call themselves a psychologist, who cannot. In India, we do not have any regulatory body. So there are people who just do a 2-day certificate course in counseling and they start calling themselves as psychologists. So I know a friend of mine whose grandfather did a 2-day certificate course in hypnosis and then started calling himself as a counselor. So there is a widespread quackery in this domain, especially in India, in the absence of any regulatory body. And again, what happens in India is when people do go through problems, very often instead of consulting a psychologist, they would rather consult an astrologer or a crystal healer or maybe a tarot card reader or any such professional, so to say, quote unquote, who practices these pseudoscientific techniques. So, in a situation like this, psychology becomes extremely, extremely important. Now, the question is, what exactly is the scope and what are the career options in the discipline of psychology? Many students, when they come to psychology, they are mainly fascinated by two areas. One, clinical psychology. Number two, counseling psychology. What is clinical psychology all about and what do clinical psychologists do? Now, clinical psychologists, they work with severe mental health cases. So, especially cases such as those related to schizophrenia, severe depression, dementia, severe anxiety disorders, and so on. Many clinical psychologists, they work either in hospital settings or in private practice, though some also work in NGOs. Now, unlike clinical psychologists, counseling psychologists, they deal with less severe mental health problems, something that most of us experience at some point in time in our lives. Oh, you know what? I can't get along with my husband. My husband is so irritating. Abhi kya kare mere husband ka? You know what? My mother-in-law keeps interfering in everyday affairs. I just can't stand her anymore. Can you give me some advice? Well, I need to decide what to do after class 12 so that I can have a successful and a fulfilling career. Now, these are the concerns that most of us have or will have at some point in time. So these concerns are addressed by a counseling psychologist or a counselor. Okay, but let me tell you that counselors do not give any advice. They will not tell you do this, do that, but they will assist you in finding the strategies that will help you do better. So counselors are more like facilitators. The third domain that is increasingly catching attention in the Indian context is industrial organizational psychology. Industrial organizational psychologists, they apply the principles of psychology to create better workspaces. Now, when employees work in an organization, life will not always be a bed of roses for them. Employees face a lot of problems. Organizations also have a lot of concerns to deal with. So, what can be done to improve employee productivity and motivation? At the same time, what can be done to improve the overall organization performance? Now, these are the issues that industrial organizational psychologists deal with. These psychologists also look into the issues of selection and hiring of employees, training the employees so that the employees develop necessary skills to perform effectively at the workplace. Yes, and industrial organizational psychologists also focus on maximizing the wellness and enhancing the quality of life of employees who work in the organization. Another domain in psychology is educational and school psychology. Now, educational psychologists primarily focus on how can the teaching learning process be enhanced. Often, if you see in many schools and colleges, students are not motivated to learn or study. Teachers also have little motivation to teach. So it becomes more like a monotonous activity where teacher just says a few things from the PPT and students are like just passively absorbing whatever is coming their way. But does that mean that this instruction is effective? The answer is no. So what can be done to make this process more engaging? Educational psychologists address this question. They often work either in the Department of Education or they also work with boards like CBSE, ICSE, IB, state boards. Okay, in terms of how syllabi can be designed to make the whole process more engaging, the whole process of teaching learning. School psychologists, on the other hand, they work in school settings. Now, when teachers teach during their classes, they come across students who do not pay attention to what the teachers are saying, who constantly keep disrupting the classroom learning process. There are students who have learning difficulties. Now, what do you do with these students who pose a challenge in this whole scenario? So, school psychologists, they deal with these students. You also have forensic psychology. Forensic psychology lies at the intersection of psychology and law, which means forensic psychologists work with the attorneys, lawyers, and juries. Forensic psychologists, they focus on understanding the psychological makeup and the personality profile of the criminals and even the victims. So forensic psychologists also provide expert testimony in court cases and are also involved in issues related to child custody. You also have sports psychology. So sports psychologists usually work in sports associations where they focus on helping the athletes and sports people to improve their motivation and confidence, overcome any mental barriers so that they're able to not only meet the required goal, but also excel at the sports activity. And the last career option that I am in basically is academics. So, as an academician, I teach courses at the university. I also am expected to do research in certain areas that fascinate me. Along with that, there also will be some administrative responsibilities in terms of conducting admission interviews, being a part of certain committees. So, these are some of the career options in psychology. So, what are the qualities of a good psychology student and by default also a psychologist? One is critical thinker. Now, when I talk about critical thinker, it is the ability to separate the wheat from the chaff. With the proliferation of internet, we have access to so much of information. But can all the information be trusted? No. So, how do we decide which information is reliable, which information is not? And this critical thinking skill will help you decide this. So, for example, to be a critical thinker, you also need to be open minded. Now, I may believe that all vegetarians are peace lovers and all non vegetarians are aggressive. But do I have any evidence for this belief? Let's say if a research study is published which mentions that food habits have nothing to do with aggression. Now, if I'm able to change my belief in the light of evidence, somewhere critical thinking has played a role. So, critical thinking, in other words, it helps you not only separate the wheat from the chaff, but it also helps you become more open minded. The next quality is to be patient and persistent. Now, when you practice either as a clinical psychologist or as a counselor, you will be seeing a lot of cases. Many of psychology students are fascinated when they embark on their journey of being a mental health professional. But there are cases where no matter what you do, the progress just doesn't seem to happen. And at that point of time, it's very easy to feel frustrated. But one thing that a psychologist must definitely master is the virtue of patience. You also have to be persistent. When the going gets tough, the tough gets going. You have to persevere even when things don't go as planned. The third quality is to be empathetic. Now, often people think empathy is the same as sympathy, but these are two different terms. When I sympathize with someone, I'm feeling sorry for that person. Oh, what a poor thing. So when I sympathize, I'm actually putting the other person down. But in empathy, I'm adopting the other person's frame of reference. I'm trying to put myself in the other person's shoes and experience the world as if it was the other person's. So you don't have to lose that as if quality. And this is a skill that will help you succeed as a mental health professional, the skill to be empathetic. Now, the question is, how do we become empathetic? So, I had a friend who's not married and was counseling the couples. And accidentally, this friend said, I understand what you must be going through. The female in the pair said, how can you understand what you're going through if you're not married? She had a point. So instead of saying, I can understand what you're going through, a better way would be, I'm sure it must have been a difficult experience or a difficult situation. So, how do we become more empathetic? The more experiences we expose ourselves to, the more empathetic we will become. The next quality is that of being an active listener. In many of the conversations that we are a part of, are we really interested in what the other person is saying? We often put on a pretense, right? Haha, okay, all right, But in many cases, we are not interested. But to be an active listener, you have to immerse yourself in the conversation. You have to get in the skin of the character and try to understand what exactly the other person is conveying. So you have to go beyond what is explicit. In other words, you have to read between the lines. So being an active listener is a very important skill. And the last is to be an effective communicator. Now, as psychologists, as mental health professionals, you will be speaking to a lot of people. Some of them may be experts, the other could be lay people, could also be talking to children. You have to understand how differently will your talks be organized depending on who your audience is. I cannot talk what I'm talking with the experts. I cannot say the same thing when I'm talking to lay people because the two different audiences have two different expectations altogether. Yes. Now, the last question is, what is the way ahead? Assuming that you are in class 12 and now you have decided that you want to become a psychologist, you definitely will have to go for an undergraduate program in psychology, either a BA or a BSc. There is not much of a difference between these two programs, except that a BA program is more theory driven, whereas a BSc program is more practical and research driven. But by and large, the courses that you'll study in these two programs will be more or less the same. After the BA or the BSc program, you will have to go for a master's program, either an MA or an MSc. Now, many students think that they can practice as a psychologist after completing their undergraduate program. But my answer is the opportunities are very less if you just stay with an undergraduate degree. With a master's degree in hand, you can do a lot more. Now, after doing a master's in psychology, if you want to be in academics, you have to go for a PhD program. And as per the UGC regulations, to be in academics, full-time academics, you need to have a PhD from a university recognized by this body. But to practice as a clinical psychologist, you need to have an MPhil in clinical psychology from an institute recognized and approved by the Rehabilitation Council of India, what is popularly also called the RCI. Now, I have completed my PhD from IIT Bombay. So let me share my experience of what it was to get into the PhD program and what was my experience of being in the PhD program. So to first talk about getting into the PhD program, you have to clear either a NET or a JRF exam. This makes you eligible to appear for IIT's entrance exam. If you do not have a NET or a JRF, you will not be shortlisted for IIT entrance exam. Now, assume that you are shortlisted. Then you will have to appear for the institute entrance exam. If you're in a top certain percentile, then you will be called for an interview. And based on your performance in the entrance exam and the interview, the selection decision will be made. Okay, so that's how I got into the PhD program at IIT Bombay. Now, coming to the topic of what is the PhD program like? Very often, when we enter a PhD program, we have a very specific topic in mind. And we think that this is what I want to work with for the next few years of my life. But let me tell you that you're going to make a big mistake if you are going with that narrow-minded approach. PhD program will open up a whole gamut of ideas. And this is a program that will let you explore and try out a lot of areas and concepts which are either tangentially or directly related to the topic that fascinates you. Okay, so you have to read a lot. So when you read one article, it will open up new avenues and you'll be now reading some other articles which you would not have thought of reading before. So the more articles you read, the more literature you expose yourself to, the broader your thinking. So broadening your thinking horizons is very important for you to succeed in the PhD program. A good PhD thesis is the thesis that reflects holistic thinking. At the same time, it also reflects an analytical bent of mind in the way the data is looked at. So with this, I end my talk for today. Now I would like to open the floor for questions.
Yeah, if anybody wants to ask any question, so you can just unmute yourself and yeah, now you can unmute yourself, friends. Anybody has any question? No questions? So it looks like they're not ready to ask any questions.
Any comments that you would like to make?
Dr. Disha ma'am. Good evening, ma'am. Yeah, okay, friends. If you have any question, anytime you can unmute yourself and ask the question. I thank Ninad sir from the bottom of my heart, because when I put forward this request that I am starting a channel just for the sake of the psychology fraternity who are not able to go in the right way. Yes, we have a message from ma'am. Just attended to find out the career opportunities from my daughter. Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. and the monsoon is also started, so many of them are not able to log in because of rain and connectivity issues. So we totally understand. And this channel Psychology, because I have this intention that anybody who is really interested in the field of psychology, maybe they are into psychology or they want to come into psychology, because many places I have seen many colleges where psychology department is being shut down, and I felt really bad because I myself spent around 16 to 18 years in the field of engineering. I have done my BTech, MTech, and 12 years of experience as assistant professor of electrical engineering, and then I found my passion in psychology, and then I switched back. The only intention behind me organizing this seminar is I thought I have wasted a lot of time. I don't want others to waste that much time. So at least they should have some guidance. So that is why I have named it as a Psych-College. So it will be a kind of college kind of learning, even for someone who is just interested in psychology, for a general knowledge concept, or anybody willing to opt for psychology, maybe BS psychology, BSc psychology, MA psychology, MSc psychology, or if you are a practicing psychologist, whether it is good to be a counseling psychologist or clinical psychologist, or whether it is good to shift into or opt for industrial organizational psychology. Because there are some universities, sir, Ninad sir, where they don't have any specialization, just like we had in IGNO. In the second year, we are given the choice of selecting whether you want to go for counseling psychology or clinical psychology or organizational psychology. But there are some universities, I don't want to mention their names, in the distance mode, they are giving one subject in the second year on counseling psychology, one subject on clinical psychology, and one subject on organizational behavior. And they are claiming themselves as expert in all the fields. So that made me fear, because the field of psychology is also getting like many people, they're not creating awareness among the students, not creating awareness to develop the subject of psychology or develop the departments of psychology. And that is why, even though public are interested in psychology, some are having the misconception that it is a field of medicine. I have not done by MBBS, or I have not taken biology, physics, chemistry, so maybe I can't come into this side of psychology. Maybe masters in psychology. I am a BTech graduate. Can I come into masters in psychology? These are all the questions I had in my mind long back when I introspected and found that my interest is in psychology, and I had done a very different thing, quite opposite thing, engineering. And thank you very much, Ninad sir. And with this, this is the first webinar from Psychology YouTube channel. It is also parallelly streaming live on YouTube. If anybody want to share it, so please, you can subscribe to this channel. I'll provide the link in the comment box, and you can share it to any of your friends. Maybe they might have missed it because of connectivity issues or something. And Ninad sir is right now at very far away place. Even though he's going to attend a marriage function also, he did not say that, Suresh, today it cannot happen. So I thank him from the bottom of my heart. And way back when I was working as assistant professor in some engineering college, I used to think, can I meet somebody? Can I talk to someone who studied in IIT? So that used to be like a dream for me. But interacting with Ninad sir, and he's so humble, he's so down to earth, and he gave us his precious time. I'm very thankful to you, sir. And I would also like to add, Ninad sir is a gold medalist in his bachelor's in psychology, and then again gold medalist in master's in psychology, and he has done it from the premier institute of India, IIT Bombay, his PhD. Many people, when I qualified UGC net and when I qualified GATE in psychology, they used to call me or message me and ask me that, sir, can you guide me through this? Maybe I say, definitely sir, sure sir, I put the message. But I don't think being a research scholar, full-time research scholar in psychology, I may not be able to help my fellow psychology enthusiast. And that is the reason I thought, I should maybe I'm not having time, but in the weekends, maybe half an hour, 15 minutes or 20 minutes, whatever I am reading, I'm still learning. So, but whatever I'm learning, I would like to document it. So that is the main intention behind me in creating this YouTube channel. Thank you very much, Ninad sir. Is there anybody who would like to ask any question?
Thank you, Suresh. And I see a few questions in the chat box. The first question by Dr. Disha Khaire is it advisable to do it as a distance learning program or a degree? So my answer would be that if you want to succeed in the discipline of psychology, doing either an undergraduate or a master's or a PhD program in psychology from a distance learning mode is not advisable, because distance learning programs usually do not equip you with the hands-on learning experiences that a regular program will. And again, if you want to get into higher education programs, should you have done the earlier programs from a distance education mode? In many universities, distance education learning is not considered as, I mean, students who go through distance learning programs are not considered as eligible for uh, the higher education programs. So doing it from a regular mode would always be advisable. The second question is by Mr. Datta. I would like to know how psychology can influence society. My answer is psychology is a discipline that can be applied to almost every sphere of life. Psychology as a discipline can be used to build better communities. So we have a domain called community psychology, where psychologists work with groups of people. For example, women who have undergone domestic violence, or for example, uh, groups of, say, sexual minorities, or also people coming from the underprivileged backgrounds. So psychologists also work actively with these groups and are increasingly focusing on empowering these sections of the society. So yes, psychology can play a huge role in bringing about a change for the better. What is an applied psychology program? Okay, now when we talk about a psychology program, either it can be a pure psychology or an applied psychology. A pure psychology program will focus more on the theoretical frameworks, but an applied psychology program will focus on how these principles can be applied to different domains. For example, when you work in an organization, or when you work with children, or when you work with the elderly, or when you work, say, for example, with certain communities. So in that case, psychology, applied psychology program comes into picture. The focus is not on learning the theories, but on understanding how these theories can be used in everyday life. Okay, I wanted to prepare for NET psychology. Will you please give me some suggestions? Now, one thing is, if you want to prepare for NET psychology exam, you have to be thorough with what you have learned in the undergraduate program as well as in your master's. So whichever reference books you have referred to, please go through them again, brush through all the concepts that you've learned. That will help you prepare for the NET psychology exam. And I specifically recommend Barron and Byrne's Social Psychology, then Morgan and King's Introduction to Psychology. These are some books that will come handy when you prepare for the NET psychology exam. And there are a lot of guides and study books specifically designed for the NET psychology program. So you can refer to these sources when preparing for the NET exam.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. To the very first question, I would like to add one point to, is it advisable to do it as a distance learning program? Madam, in the year 2021, there is a National Mental Health Act, and according to that, they say that the student should be undergoing at least 3,600 hours of regular classroom teaching, but not distance learning. Before 2021, there was no such act. So maybe many people might have gone for distance learning, but now it is still surprising to me that people are even now going for distance learning, taking admission into distance learning of psychology. Although I appreciate it, out of their interest, they're taking psychology. But maybe I feel that they're not aware of this mental health act. If they are really aware of this and they want to practice psychology, they should be doing it in the regular mode. And when me myself, since I have done it in the distance mode because I was working as a faculty in some college, when I have applied for many universities for my PhD program, there some of the universities directly mentioned that your PG should be a regular program, and that is where we find trouble getting admission into PhD or higher level programs. And as per the Mental Health Act also, if you have done it from a distance learning mode, you cannot put a practice as a psychologist and all. So I recommend it to be a regular mode. But if it is just out of interest and you don't want to practice or something, you can definitely go for distance mode.
Okay, there's another question. Any suggestions as to which foreign universities can be explored for masters? Now, usually many students consider either UK, US, Canada, or Australia when it comes to going for the master's program. A master's program in UK usually is for 1 year. In US, it is for 2 years, but usually the master's program is a part of grad school. So after completing the master's, students can either terminate their studies or can continue further to get the PhD degree. Usually the psychology programs in US are more rigorous compared to those offered in other countries. So I would recommend specifically considering universities in the US for higher studies. And the second option would then be to consider universities in the UK. Okay, so there is a question, can it be possible to understand others' internal feelings, what they are thinking, what is running currently in their mind in this program? My answer is psychology as a science, it focuses more on the behavior. So often the way people behave, the way they do things, that can give us a certain inkling or a cue about what is going on in their mind. So yes, in some of the courses that we teach and what students learn, there is some emphasis given on how other people's internal thoughts and feelings can be deciphered, if not exactly, at least to some extent, by understanding their behavior. Okay, so I've already joined in 2021 in distance mode. Is my PhD degree going to be valid? I haven't even studied the subject at the graduate level. Okay, now there are students who have entered the discipline of psychology at their master's level. They have not studied psychology at the graduate level. Now, as Suresh mentioned earlier, okay, pursuing the psychology program in a regular mode would be a lot more beneficial and is highly recommended. But just because you are pursuing your PG program in a distance learning mode, the degree does not become valid. Okay, sorry, the degree does not become invalid, but you will not be given first preference should you apply for higher education programs. Okay, and in India, especially students who do their studies in distance learning mode are often looked at differently should they apply for careers or jobs in the discipline of psychology. So many employers are a bit skeptical of hiring such candidates. Okay, but the degree still remains valid. Any more questions? Okay. Do you think when compared to the last decade, now people in India started realizing the importance of psychology and opting to choose it and study it? Is it because people realize stress is a part of life and they need to know how to handle it on the other side? Is it true that people with problems are really looking forward to meet a psychologist in India? There are a lot of questions within this. First thing, yes, increasingly people are realizing the importance of psychology, and particularly in the aftermath, okay, of the COVID-19 coming in, and during the pandemic, people began to realize the importance of psychology even more, because during the pandemic, okay, we were expected to practice social distancing, and practicing social distancing can trigger a lot of negative emotions like anxiety, depression, and they have taken a toll on the mental well-being of many people. So psychology as a discipline caught a lot of attention during this phase. And of course, with the kind of lifestyles that we are living, stress is becoming an integral part. We really are not able to escape it, its consequences. So these two factors particularly have contributed towards the increasing importance of psychology. Now, the other question is it true that people with problems are really looking forward to meet a psychologist in India? My answer is a yes as well as a no. So people who are aware are the ones who are more likely to consult a psychologist should they realize they have some issues which need to be addressed. But even today, there are many people who believe that should they have a problem, they can handle it on their own. अपने आप वो problem जाएगा. Okay, there's no need to go to a psychologist. But at times, we need to understand that when we have a problem, we have to consult the right expert. So, for example, when we feel physically ill, we consult a medical doctor, a physician. Similarly, when we go through any mental health problems, we have to consult a psychologist. So, we have to normalize the whole domain of mental health. Mental health is important for everyone, you, me, all the people who are living on this planet. But again, many families in India are reluctant to let their family members consult a psychologist. बाहर वालों को पता चलेगा तो मतलब हमारी तो इज्जत ही गई. And this problem continues in many families even today. So without holding proper psychology degrees, you would not be able to call yourself a psychologist. And especially if you are looking forward to work in the discipline or the domain of psychology, you would have a hard time finding a suitable job. So that's why I recommend that you complete the psychology programs in a regular mode. So if they start counseling, then the damage is immense. Now, to become a trained counselor, you not only have to complete a master's program in counseling psychology, but after that, work under a trained counselor for a few years before you start practicing. Now, if you start counseling without proper training, there's a very high chance you'll end up doing things that instead of benefiting would harm the client. Okay, and we really cannot afford to play with the mental health of anyone. Does that answer your question? So with your expertise, can you suggest counseling or clinical psychology, which is the best? So it's really difficult to arrive at a conclusive answer to this question because both the disciplines are good in their own ways. Now, let me tell you that having a degree in clinical psychology opens up far more avenues than a degree in counseling psychology would. So, with a degree in clinical psychology, you still can go into counseling. You still can think of working in corporate organizations and provide mental health services there. But if you are doing a master's in counseling, it's very difficult to enter the realm of clinical psychology should you wish to enter this domain later. So the options, career options that you can pursue are far more with a degree in clinical psychology than that with a counseling. But both these domains are equally fulfilling and satisfying. Okay, so Ms. Vijaya, Suresh would be able to answer this question.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Would like to know more about psychopathology. Can we expect another class with you? Okay, okay, ma'am. Ma'am, definitely I'll plan in the near future. So thank you very much. I'll definitely keep this in mind while planning the next sessions. Yes, friends, if we are done with the questions, I would like to thank Ninal sir for coming and accepting my invitation. Yes, ma'am. Welcome, ma'am. And here it is heavily raining. It's a heavy downpour. So I lost in the internet. Came with my mobile phone. Thank you very much, Ninad sir, and thank you all the participants who have come all the way. And yes, Nagesh sir says, with your expertise, can you please put a light on any
Okay.
psychological issue?
Answer this question, it depends on the severity of the problem. Now, some mental health problems are very severe and they cannot be handled by a counseling psychologist, no matter what stage of the problem it is. There are certain problems that definitely need to be handled by a clinical psychologist and a psychiatrist. But problems which are not too severe, something that most of us experience on a daily basis or at some point in time in our lives, these problems can be addressed or handled by a counselor.
Yes, friends.
Yeah.
Any more questions, friends? I think the questions are over, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, Nina, sir. Thank you very much from the bottom of my heart for coming and starting my YouTube channel. The channel name is PSYCOLLEGE, PSYCOLLEGE. College for people who are not having a college also. That is my intention, because many of the distance learning programs, no, they just ask the students to come and write, just appear for the exam. And after passing the exam, they are putting counseling centers and they are telling that we have learned so many things. But in reality, that is not the thing. So I thought I should do something, and I should give my knowledge and my acquaintances a bank of knowledge. So just like Ninad sir. So thank you very much, sir, once again. Friends, the link to my YouTube channel is given in the description box. Please all of you subscribe and share this video link with your friends and media. Thank you very much.
Yes. So there's
And
one
we have
question.
questions, sir.
Yeah. So with a degree in clinical psychology, you can still enter into education and academic sector. I did my master's in clinical psychology, after which I went for a PhD program, and then I entered academics after completing my PhD. So that answers your question, Yashwant. Thank you, Mr. Nagesh, for your feedback. I appreciate it.
Yes, friends, thank you for participating. So please share, please subscribe, and please share positivity and happiness with the society, because psychology is not a separate thing. It is always within us, the way we behave, think, feel, act. So thank you very much, Niraj sir. We would like to conclude today's session, and thanks once again.
Yeah, thank you, Suresh, and thank you all participants for attending the session. Have a great evening ahead and wish you a lot of success in the years to come.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Nagesh sir, also. Looking
Thank
forward
you.
to listen more from you, sir. Thank you. Okay, sir.